Hello, Mark.
Hi, Gabby.
Now, later we are going to be talking about a big lawsuit facing tennis's governing bodies, but it has felt like one of those incredible sporting weekends that we're going to have to almost race through just to scratch the sides of it, I think.
We are, because we're going to do a big thing on Arne Slot and Liverpool in a little while, so we won't feature that in this little bit.
Yeah, we're not ignoring it from a brilliant weekend. We're not saying that wasn't part of a brilliant weekend. Well, Mark
some of us have tried. Watched a lot of snooker this weekend. It's been great.
The Women's Champions League was very interesting because I don't think anybody gave either side, Arsenal or Chelsea, really a chance, because they would have had to have massive comebacks against Lyon for Arsenal and Barcelona for Chelsea. But Arsenal only went and did it. They won away 4-1, so it was 5-3 on aggregate against the 8-time champions Lyon, who are managed by Joe Montemurro, who used to manage Arsenal. And even he has said he's still not sure how it happened. They haven't been beaten all season, Lyon. This was really against the run of play in terms of their season, Lyon's season, but amazing for Arsenal, who are the only English team who've ever won the Champions League, and it's 19 years since they last did it. No, less than that.
Without being grumpy here, a tough task though in the final, given what Barcelona did to Chelsea.
Yeah, an 8-2 aggregate loss for Chelsea. I think it's 2007 that Arsenal won it, and they haven't been back since to that final. But Barcelona are obviously stacked with stars. You've got Bonmati, Putellas, Hermosa. They are an amazing side. So it is going to be a big ask. But I couldn't help look for kind of a parallel here that's going on with the men's team, Mark, because obviously they have got French opposition in the semi-final of the Champions League against Paris Saint-Germain. Haven't played their first leg yet, of course, and they beat the same opposition, Real Madrid, in the quarterfinals as the women did as well. So, is there some kind of synergy going on here?
And might meet Barcelona in the final if they knock Inter out in the men's side of things.
Of course, that was the team they got beaten by in 2006, Arsenal's men's team, in the last time they got to the final of the Champions League. There's just a lot going on there, I think. A lot of kind of, it's in the stars type thing.
Is it? Is that what you think?
I think so, yeah.
Have you done your readings?
I did my tea leaves, and it's there. It's all there.
There was on Saturday afternoon was one of those afternoons. We're at that permutation stage of the season. There was so much going on. If X does this, then what happens to Y? Obviously, but even Gabby, as low down as National League North and National League South, when only one team gets promoted automatically. Brackley overhauling Kidderminster in the North on the final afternoon. In the South, right, any one of 6 teams could have won the title and been automatically promoted to the National League. And in the end, it went to Truro, who had started the day as the leaders anyhow, and they went up on a goal difference of 2 better than Torquay. So there is just drama everywhere at the moment. And of course, it wasn't that long ago since Wrexham were in the National League. They have now done back-to-back promotions, which I learned on Saturday. That's the first time it's ever been done in men's football. Back is what they said on Sky. I just thought the atmosphere at the end, look, I know people say they've got the Hollywood money, and I completely get that. But obviously that crowd is full of people who've been through the mill as Wrexham fans, as so many football fans have over the years. And just that outbreaking of joy and happiness, it was great.
Rich owners aren't always successful. In fact, very rarely does money buy you that quick succession, does it? Through the leagues and kind of sustain it, which they have managed to do. So their ambition is to be a Premier League side, and it feels like they're not going to stop until they're there. I mean, that is clearly the final episode of the big Netflix drama or whatever it is that they're
Disney.
It's going to be a movie. It's going to be a movie though as well, isn't it? I mean, it can't just be a TV series.
No, I would have. They could do whatever they want with it, couldn't they? And then I'll just throw a couple of other things that I watched, and then you could go back to because you worked on virtually every big event that there was over the course of the weekend. So Ben Eubank Jr. was brilliant on Saturday night in the sense of it wasn't a purist fight, and everybody talks about how it was manufactured at the weight, but it was just compelling. You couldn't take your eyes off it.
Are you of the school of thought that whole relationship narrative that was kind of underlying it with Chris Eubank Jr. and his dad that came into, its brilliant denouement on the night as they walked in together, was that all pre-planned? Was that all orchestrated?
Yeah. I mean, you know me, I'm not cynical, but yes, it felt like it, didn't it? But then, of course, if it had gone wrong and he'd lost, people would have said, "Oh, what a ridiculous thing to do to bring your dad in and all of that." And now he's won. Oh, it's a masterstroke and this, that, and the other. I'm more. I mean, that whole story. I mean, what the hell did his dad have on?
Well, I
Do you
didn't
think
watch
I could carry that off?
I was trying.
It looked like he had. It looked like he had one of Diana Ross's hairpieces around his neck. That's what it looked like. Do you think I could carry that off?
I was trying to get to sleep in a hotel in central London ahead of a 4 a.m. alarm call for the London Marathon. However, when we arrived at the hotel after having done the match at Twickenham, the Red Roses, so I got to the hotel about 8 o'clock at night. And there was a car, very expensive looking sports car outside with Eubank as its number plate. So I can only assume that some part of the party was staying at the same hotel as the world's greatest marathon runners, by the way, because it's the official marathon hotel. So what an incongruous mix that would be. And I'm assuming that the room next door to me might be something to do with the party afterwards, because about 3 o'clock in the morning, there was all hell going on there. Yeah. So I didn't sleep very well, but I'm glad they had a nice time. And
did you complain?
I thought about it, and then I thought better of it. I have once gone into the corridor in a hotel in Newcastle to tell off some boys for playing football at 2 a.m. in the corridor. It turned out they were 23, 24-year-olds, not young boys, so I was slightly startled by it, but probably won't surprise you. But the interesting thing about the end of the Six Nations was that actually England were pushed, and it was a 1-point game in the end. France came back in the second half and actually really smashed them in the second half. So I think that is very good for them going into a World Cup where they are absolute favourites, number one ranked team in the world. They've won the Six Nations 7 times in a row now. They haven't been beaten in 25 tests. So you've got to be pushed at some point before you get into a World Cup, and you've got Canada and New Zealand coming. And I feel like that was actually a very good experience for them.
They really needed it, didn't they? They really needed it.
And the crowd needed it. We needed that entertainment.
Yes, because you've had so many walkovers, haven't you? Really?
Yeah,
I mean, even those games where England have had, a wobbly 20 minutes or been behind 5-0 or 7-0 or whatever, they've then just gone on and steamrolled sides.
Yeah, the only time before really there was jeopardy was half-time against Ireland. Can I just make an apology as well? Last week, I mentioned that Paris didn't realise it was the record holder for the number of runners who finished a marathon. And because that was the information I'd been given the day before, it turns out New York was holding this record all the time. So when Paris had claimed in this year, we've got the record, New York then came back and said, no, we have the record. It doesn't matter now because London now has the record. Officially, that was one of the great joys for Hugh Brasher and the London Marathon. They are the biggest marathon in the world now. So, and the official number isn't yet out, but it's over 56,000. So,
right. So have that New York,
Paris,
or anybody else.
And could you produce 23, 24 degrees? I mean, those conditions were tough, challenging conditions for those more average runners, shall I say? I mean, those guys at the front don't really care, do they?
No.
They're through before the sun's come up. But the guys at the back who are dressed as rhinoceroses and fridges and things like that, they were absolutely baking.
You want it 5 degrees with a little bit of rain if you're dressed as a rhinoceros doing the London Marathon. Catch up with all episodes of The Sports Agents on Global Player or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe or follow, and don't forget to rate and review.
And next up, after Liverpool became English champions for a 20th time, sorry, Mark.
Record equaling.
Yeah. Feels like one of the teams is in the ascent, though, doesn't it? The other one's got a bit of work to do. Anyway, how did manager Arne Slot make the changeover look so easy?
Jonathan Northcroft is with us as well. We'll bring him in just a moment. But can you put into words yesterday afternoon, John, and how it all transpired for you?
It was everything you dream of and almost kind of dare not. Do you know what I mean? Because even though winning the title is an incredible thing, to win it how we did is actually fairly rare. I was speaking to a friend of mine, supports Manchester United, and I was at a horse racing with him a week before, and he said often we'd win it, we weren't even playing. And then you win it maybe when you are playing, but away from home or whatever. For it to be at Anfield with the sunshine and with everyone there who would normally go to sort of a home game, and everyone who couldn't be there just came to Anfield anyway and enjoyed it. It was like the best wedding you've ever been to. It was. And everyone was hugging, everyone was enjoying each other's company. The atmosphere was phenomenal. And it was, people said, oh, it's a little bit like a cup final, but cup finals, there's jeopardy. There was no jeopardy because, if they'd have lost somehow to Tottenham Hotspur, which always felt very unlikely, then there was just the next week. So it was about as perfect as a day watching your football team.
It could only be more perfect, John, if today was a bank holiday, I think. And then I think, you'd have absolutely hit the jackpot. But this has been coming, hasn't it? This is not, it wasn't a surprising day for anybody else watching on. It was going to happen. It was just when it was going to happen. And that, in a way, has led to some of the fallout today, Jonathan, that, there've been phone-ins I've been listening to and articles you've been read about, whether or not this was a poor Premier League and Liverpool, haven't hit the points tally that previous champions. And then you get these people phoning in saying, other teams have struggled this season. And one of the phone-ins was if Man City had hit their heights, would Liverpool... I hate all that stuff, right? Because you win what is there, what is in front of you, and you beat the teams that are in front of you. You go on a winning run like they have, but football fans are football fans, and they try and find what's wrong, chap.
Just because, because I haven't heard any of those phone-ins, and even though
it was one of them was on the station that you work on.
I am at the other end of Well, I only listen to the sport. So when I'm at the, obviously my allegiances are very much not at Anfield, but what a load of bollocks those theories are. I mean, I genuinely, I think this is one, it pains me, obviously, but I think it's one of the most impressive titles, to be honest.
I was going to say that anybody that I kind of considered their opinion worth taking had written pretty much that today, and that seems to be the consensus. But the interesting narrative then, of course, is how Arne Slot has done this in his first season in a league he's not managed in before, and hasn't really, when you look at his track record, hasn't really done loads in his career, hasn't got tons of experience of managing big name players and taking a team to, through Europe and all the other things that you expect a manager to come to Liverpool and maybe have had that experience. And so obviously today, Jonathan, you wrote a piece which was giving perhaps this transition from Klopp to Slot, putting it up there and exalting it as maybe one of the most successful handovers in football of all time.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, these things are so hard to get right. We see in football history, Manchester United are the most obvious recent example. Arsene Wenger staying too long and there being a sort of pain associated with that and it taking years really for them to recover. This is as good as it gets. I mean, maybe the only other precedent I can think of is AC Milan, Sacchi going, Capello taking over and winning more European Cups. Milan were a winning machine when Sacchi left, and Liverpool were in transition when this one happened. I think it reflects really well on both men. Juergen Klopp, I think one of the reasons we loved him was there was always a self-awareness about Juergen. There was always a sense where he didn't take himself too seriously and always almost looked in on his own job from the outsider himself. And I think Liverpool have benefited from that because he showed a rare self-awareness for a great manager in knowing when to go, in knowing when his energy was waning, in analysing his own managerial kind of magic, as it were. He's an emotional leader, an energy leader, and he knew it wasn't there. And he handed on at the right time. And that's the starting point. But the other side of the equation is Arne Slot, who there's such a lack of ego about him that he's been able to come in, not feel he needed to sign everybody, not feel he needed to bring a massive entourage, and be confident enough to be himself in the job. And they've got this one right. And I don't think we could have expected it to go quite so well.
Which is why I think it's one of the most impressive titles of the modern era. But yeah, I mean, your article is fantastic, Jonathan. There are so many nuggets in it. And just going back to Klopp, the speech that he gave to the players when he left about the old guy is out, what a brilliant opportunity now for fresh ideas and all of you lot to have to prove yourselves again. And he did that the final day of last season, yes?
He did. You can find it on YouTube, actually, his final dressing room speech. And what's amazing about it is it's the first speech of the next season. He's using his farewell speech to motivate them for what's to come, which speaks to the sort of rare self-awareness and character I talk about. And he said, yeah, he said, with new ideas, with a new person to prove yourself to, the sky's the limit for you guys. It's going to be better when I'm gone. And he did a Q&A recently in South Africa where he was put on the spot and asked how he felt about all of this. And he said, if things are better now, then that was exactly the idea of me leaving, and I'm happy about it.
It just speaks volumes for both men, doesn't it, John, as to how confident they are in themselves. As you say, Jonathan, self-awareness, that they can still have communication from what we understand. And in your article, you alluded to this as well, that they text each other and they communicate. That just doesn't happen, does it? In any big job, in any industry, the person that comes in thinks they can do it better than the person before, no matter what that person has done. That this transition has been so smooth and cordial has only helped the players, hasn't it? Because there's no sense there from the players, is there, that they have to prove anybody wrong, or the ones that wanted to get into the team, obviously, that weren't maybe starters for Klopp have got better. Some players have got better. Gakpo, you could argue, is a player who's flourished more. But it's an incredible attribute to have as a human being, isn't it, for both men?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's usually you find with great managers, there's an element of ego about them. There's an element of wanting to protect the legacy. You see that a lot. And a natural impulse is to want to be better than the guy that comes after you. Look, Klopp's not without ego, for sure. But he always had this sort of, as I mentioned, this sort of slight difference about him where you got the sense that the people that he represented, the club he represented, was as important to him as anything. And actually, what better way to cement your legacy than going at the right time? I mean, Arsene Wenger's now got a slightly complicated relationship with Arsenal fans, which he shouldn't when you think about what he did. But he does because he didn't go at the right time. It's a smart move as well if you want to protect your legacy, as I say, getting out when you should.
Although the only thing at the moment I can think about is that Gabby said that people who follow someone who's been in a job for a long time think they can do it better. I'm thinking that quote could come back to haunt us. Anyhow, the other thing that, John, that people refer to and have started to refer to is this sort of intellectualization of Liverpool and their approach to everything. And look, you've been on this podcast several times over this past 12 months, normally to talk about the contracts of Salah and Van Dijk and Alexander-Arnold. But what we've consistently discussed during those is that the football club is hysteria-free and they trust their process. There's still passion in the stands and amongst the team, but everybody behind the scenes trusts each other in the role that they are in. Nobody seems to interfere in other people's roles. They get on with it.
Absolutely. And I think, sometimes as fans, we want, the big signings. We're like, we'd love them to spend more money. We'd love more transfers in the summer. But then they, like you said, Mark, trusted the process, trusted what they had. And Arne Slot came in and said, actually, this squad is fantastic. And he feels like that he wants to have a look at it, first of all, but also that he thinks there's really good players there. And he was right. And they were right. And us fans who always want the shiny new thing we're mistaken, because sometimes continuity is good. The last time we won the league, Liverpool bought no one. That summer they kept with the same squad. They went again and they won it. And so I think there is a message there for all of us who sometimes think that you have to spend your way to success. That, listen, it does help and money helps. And I'm not saying that Liverpool is a poor club. The wage bill is astronomical, but I think trusting what you have and believing in what you have and thinking, in the case of Cody Gakpo, as Gabby's example of someone who, he's a really good footballer and I can develop him here. Gravenberg, who was a squad player last year and now is probably the best six in the league, is another good example as well. And you can do the old-fashioned thing of get on the training ground and work with players and make them better, who knew. And Arne Slot has done that, and he's trusted himself as a coach, and we've seen the benefits.
What's so interesting about the psychology of the two men on a superficial level, as you alluded to there, Jonathan, Klopp, such an energetic, charismatic, wears his heart on his sleeve, and Arne's so calm, spoken to him many times post-match and pre-match, always very generous and gracious and answers the questions, but in a very calm way, doesn't get too excited about anything, doesn't get too down about anything. And there's such different energies for the same group of players to respond to. aren't they? Which is so interesting that dynamic has worked. That chemistry has worked.
Yeah, and apart from at Goodison Park, I think Arnie not quite there, but yeah, no, that's part of it, though, isn't it? I mean, when when you're looking for a transition, I think the guy coming in, if they're replacing somebody successful, has to be able to bring and embody some of the things that the previous manager had or the previous person had, but have their own energy, their own sort of way. Because if the message was just the same, or the manner of delivering the message was just the same, that would be a challenge to the players. You can see, Salah was talking on the pitch yesterday about almost sitting down and having a rational conversation with Arne Slot about how to get the best out of him in this sort of later stage of his career. And that's, Arne Slot sort of spends a lot of time, we're led to believe, in his office with his tactics board, his videos. He loves clips and videos. During the match, you might, if it's quiet in the main stand, you might actually hear him shouting the word clip, because he's shouting at the video analysts he's seen a bit of play that he wants to clip up and then show the players either at half time or on the training pitch. So there's a more analytical kind of sort of cerebral way of doing things that has been one of the ways in which he's been able to just perfect what Klopp left him. Trent Alexander-Arnold's another example, just bringing him one-to-one defensive coaching, little details, which a little bit different to the Klopp sort of more holistic emotional energy management.
I think your players deserve credit, though, don't they, John? Which again goes back to the point of Klopp saying to the players, you need to prove yourselves again. Andy Robertson said it very early on in the season, actually, about how he was enjoying having to prove himself to a new manager. Players can go one of two ways when somebody long-serving leaves. They either go to the new guy coming in, well, no, we do it like this is how we've been successful, or they go the Liverpool way, which is, you tend to hear is slightly more unusual or rare, and go, right, we have to prove ourselves.
Absolutely, and there's a great humility to this group of Liverpool players that deserves, like you say, Mark, a lot of respect. And it would have been quite easy. And to be honest, it was something I was a little bit worried about. You take a look at this fella and go, well, who the heck's he? They've won everything. They've won European Cups, league titles, a lot of these players. And Arne Slot's coming in with a decent reputation, but not an incredible one. And he's very forthright, he's very honest, he's very sort of straight. And I think, in particular, Mo Salah, because he was one of the first players that the manager worked with. Because of the international tournament in the summer, he got some of them quite late, but Mo was there straight away. And you could see how quickly Mo was buying in. And I think that was a really important moment for the manager, really, when you've got one of the best players in the world going, yeah, let's have a go. Let's see how this goes and let's enjoy it and see what happens. I think Mo was probably ready for a different voice and something a little bit different, but the fact that he bought into it, I think, was really important to them. Virgil as well. But I think they have got this desire to improve, and they've got this desire to always be better. That doesn't always happen at the very top of football. And I think they deserve huge credit for that, for sure.
And you look at this example of a brilliant succession and wonder what other clubs could learn from it. But actually, so much is predicated on those individuals. And having Richard Hughes, the sporting director, had time, because Klopp came to him before he made the announcement. So he had time to think about this, spent time thinking about who that person would be. Klopp having the self-awareness to decide, it's my time to go. All of those things, they just don't happen, do they, in most football clubs, in most scenarios, with most people. So this was a perfect storm of all those individuals as much as anything else.
It was. I mean, I think another factor you've got to bear in mind, I suppose, is that Michael Edwards coming back as chief executive of football and then bringing Richard Hughes as sporting director, those are key elements. And they probably wouldn't have happened if Klopp had stayed, because Klopp had become so kind of embedded and big, I guess, that he was the sort of old-fashioned manager by the end of his time, the kind of all-powerful guy. And Liverpool wanted to update the model, move back, but also kind of fully move into the head coach model. And I don't think Edwards would have come back with Juergen as powerful as he was. So as you say, Gabby, Juergen told Mike Gordon, the president of FSG, back in November, I think, of the year that he was going to give a little bit of time on the quiet to allow the owners to start thinking about it. And that's when they were able to bring Edwards back and get those bits in place before Klopp's announcement in the January. And then there was 3 or 4 months where, it's no accident there's a lot of data's gone into selecting Arne Slot. A lot of, sort of, I guess, soft research methods. Michael Edwards is famous for kind of spying on people he wants to sign or hire as managers. And a lot of research was done on who Arne Slot is, right down to the fact that they looked at the fact he was managing Feyenoord, which is a port city, emotional club, emotional place. The Kuip is very similar to Anfield, or quite similar in Dutch terms anyway. Even thinking about how does this guy connect with a fan base and what type of fan base does he connect with, all of that went into place. There is a lot other clubs could learn from this for sure.
How big is this summer then, John?
It's huge, but I think Liverpool can attack it with a position of strength. I think we're the team to beat next season, is my personal opinion. I think, you don't know what's going to happen over the summer, but right now I'd put as favourites for next year as well because of the signings, in terms of the signings of new contracts and everything that we've got. And so they'll want to get other players in, but I just think, and I am biased, but why wouldn't you want to play for Liverpool? You see it on Sunday and everything around it and how much fun it was and the celebration and the togetherness and the manager and the elite players that we have here and the leadership that they have. I just think if you're any footballer looking at that, you think, well, why would you want to go somewhere else? Why would you want to play anywhere else? People talk about other clubs being, attractive or whatever. You say you want to go to Real Madrid, you go away. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're all fighting with each other and making a show of themselves.
The way they're behaving at the moment, I wouldn't want to go anywhere near Real Madrid. Crikey.
It's a soap opera, and Liverpool have got this togetherness, and we pay well, and it's the place to be. It's certainly the place to be today, this weekend.
John,
let me tell you.
As much as winning the league in front of the fans and that perfect storm of the weather and everything, all of that, how big was equaling the 20? How important was that landmark?
It's nice, but listen,
don't roll your eyes at me, Chapman.
Just had to put my glass, just some in my eye at that point.
It's nice, but listen, Jonathan will tell you, we think we're the biggest club in the country anyway. So we're not in necessarily as much need as validation as other people think sometimes. We think we're the biggest club in the world, and it's nice when the rest of the world catches up.
Are we done? Are we done? Anything else?
Mark, if you want to come for a pie in Liverpool, it's going off tonight. Come on, enjoy yourself, mate.
Go on, chappers. Go on.
Do you know what, John? I would love to have a pie with you, but maybe we pick Warrington or somewhere. Maybe we go somewhere in between. Yeah.
In your job, John, you have to find things to get a debate going about, right? When you have a season like this, where it's been fairly flawless, right? Have there been any points where you've had a moan either about the manager or what was going on at the club? I mean, maybe not getting the signings sorted, but aside from that, what was going on at the pitch?
I think the interesting thing for next year is he's not rotating much this year, and I think you could see it in the PSG game at home when we got to extra time and they just had more legs than us than the Carabao Cup final where Newcastle ran all over us, really, and that was at the end of a really tough period. And Arne Slot said it. He's never worked for this long. He's never worked from November to March solidly. He's always had
2 weeks off in January.
Yeah, a nice break. And so we're quite unique in that. And so I think they'll be learning from that. But it's going to be really interesting next year to see, well, does he just not like rotating? Does he just like playing the same players? Or did he not have enough players that he trusted to bring him in and out more? And I think if they sign 3 or 4 new players in the summer, it's going to be really interesting next year. Are we going to see more rotation, or does he just like?
It's been interesting that your injuries have been down, or your injury count isn't very high, and you don't rotate. But those two things don't marry, do they? That has been it's been fortunate, but there must be a reason why your injuries or your injury count isn't so high.
Yeah, and I think both of those points are correct. There's always a bit of luck with injuries, but I don't think it is just looking. One of the reasons he was hired, and Jonathan will tell you about this, is one of the things they identified is that he keeps players fit and he looks at players and how they analyse it. And I think there was a general acceptance that Juergen Klopp and the style of football made it more likely that you would get injuries. And so they would have. In some ways they're similar, in other ways they're different. And one of the ways they were very different scale was that if you play for Juergen, then you're likely to sort of pick up things from the heavy metal style of football. And Arne Slot had a different approach. And so there's elements of fortune, of course, because sometimes things can happen and it can happen in international football and things like that. But also, I think they have identified a manager who keeps players on the pitch, and that was a big part of getting him in.
Yes, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, things like playing that extra pass that Arne Slot likes to do to sometimes take the heat out of a game. If you look at some of the stats, it's quite interesting. Liverpool are slower in their play overall. By January, they're actually run the least in the league, which is really interesting. And I think Arne Slot wants more of that. He talks quite a lot about how they need to win more games by a clear margin, so that players can rest, basically. He wants this to become a team that goes 2 and 3-0 up, so the last 20 minutes of a game. And City did that for so long under Guardiola, didn't they? Where they'd kill a team in the first half, and the second half was just a rest. He wants to move towards that, so he's always got an eye on that too. I think to develop, John mentioned the PSG game, and if we're comparing him to Klopp, and let's be honest, Klopp is still on a higher pedestal because of the heights that he reached, and that's what Arne Slot's still got to aspire to, particularly in Europe. And it's hard to think of that PSG game at Anfield going the way that it did had Klopp been manager. Liverpool might still have lost it, but I think you'd have seen Klopp go for broke, just turn that game into mayhem, make loads of substitutions, up the ante, up the intensity. There's a calmness about Slot's football as well as himself. But that can mean the team's only got one gear sometimes. So there's different levels that he can still find. And as we said at the start of this, he's still relatively inexperienced, still relatively a young coach. So I would expect him to be better next year as well.
Good, that's a joyous end to all about the county championship season now. Thank you. No more football chat on this podcast till August.
Thank you so much for joining us, John. You're probably desperate to get to your bed tonight, aren't you? A nice early night, or are you carrying it on?
No, we're back on. Mark, I'll send you a location where we're going, mate. All right?
Good job. Brilliant.
John, you look very fresh. You look very, very fresh. I'm impressed.
I'm covering a multitude of sins.
Next up, could tennis be in for a big shake-up after a giant lawsuit?
Ahmad Nassar, Executive Director of the Professional Tennis Players Association, essentially the Tennis Players Union, joins us.
Thanks for joining us again on The Sports Agents, Ahmed.
Thank you for having me.
Things have moved on a bit since the last time we spoke to you. Here we are with this legal action out there now. But there are a few differences, I guess, to kind of when we first spoke to you. For example, Novak Djokovic, who's one of the big names associated with the PTPA, isn't part of this. Some other players have said, Alcaraz has said he doesn't want to be quoted with this. Is that disappointing to you that those big names have pulled away from the action?
No, and Novak is still the executive committee of the PTPA. He's obviously a co-founder of the PTPA. So, he said, look, I'm part of the PTPA executive leadership. I'm a co-founder. The PTPA is actually a party separately in the US action, the UK action, the EU action. So the nuance was he's not a named plaintiff, which is sort of like an incremental step. And he articulated, I think, just before the Miami Open, the reasoning for that to allow other players to step up, which we've seen with folks like Riley Opelka and Ingrid Neal and Nick Kyrgios, obviously. But also some doubles players, some lower ranked players, men and women, to be able to step up.
The lawsuit is wide ranging and includes everything from prize money to the schedule to the time matches finished to searches of personal devices to anti-competitive practices, even to using a universal ball at all tournaments. Does putting all the issues in one go make things complicated? And what is the overall aim of the lawsuit?
Yeah, I'll start with the second question. The aim is reform, broad reform. And so the reason the complaint in New York is 163 pages and covers all the issues you outlined and more is because the players want broad reform. Gabby, back to your original question, you mentioned Carlos Alcaraz and some other players. Players support reform. That's what we're aiming to achieve. Do they support a 163-page, legal document filed in the Southern District of New York? That sounds complicated and detailed and right. So it's not about support. When people ask me, do you have player support? I always say, well, support for what? Reform? Absolutely. By the way, just a week after we filed this lawsuit, the top 10 players sent a letter, both men and women, to the Grand Slams with broad, but not as broad, requests for more prize money, more benefits, contributions to pension. That's all part of the reform we're looking for, right? And so that to me is an example of, look, players very much, top players, lower ranked players, singles, doubles, men, women, are looking for reform. Mark, part of what we need to do is get everybody who runs the sport of tennis to get aligned. We have alignment on the player side that we want reform, and it's really across three different main categories. Yes, compensation is one of them, but the other two are really governance and representation, right? And so to be able to say, hey, the governance now affects things like the schedule and the balls and the late night matches, but it's really at a high level, it's just the governance of the sport. And in turn, the representation issues revolve around, hey, this monopolization that has occurred over the last 20, 30, 40 years in tennis is a direct reflection, and the lack of compensation commensurate with other sports as a percentage is a direct reflection of inadequate representation. Not no, but inadequate representation on behalf of tennis players.
One of the things when I was reading around this that I was quite surprised about was that prize money, for example, is so controlled that the organisers of Indian Wells wanted to increase the prize money there, but they're not allowed to do that. So there's almost a cap on certain tournaments, which then is curtailing and restricting the earning potential, isn't it, of tennis players across the whole sport if you can't have your own individual prize pot.
That's exactly right. And in any other business, if you and I had a business and we met with our competitors and said, we're going to limit the prices we charge, so that we can all make more money, that would be illegal in the UK and in the EU and in the United States. It's anti-competitive, it's price fixing, it's monopolization. And yet, when it comes to sports, part of what we're trying to do here is make the point that should already be known to everybody, which is international sports are big international businesses. They generate billions of dollars of cash. Just recently, we've seen Madrid and Miami sold for over $1 billion, with exactly zero of that being earmarked for the players, right? And so we have to operate under the law. We have to operate as real, true international businesses. Yes, they are sports. Yes, people love to watch these things, and that's great. But we can't lose sight of the fact that these are international businesses and we have to run them the same way. And since, Gabby, we filed our complaint, we've heard from multiple other tournaments that they had similar issues. They wanted to pay more prize money. They wanted to do better by the players, and were limited in their ability to do that by the governing bodies. That's unacceptable.
Who runs tennis then? And also, the lawsuit is taken out against the differing bodies. Do they work together?
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue is the people we named run tennis, and nobody runs tennis, right? And the fragmentation in the sport is crippling. And having 4 Grand Slams, 2 tours, a men's tour, a women's tour, the ITF, the ITIA now handling doping. You've got 7 or 8 different entities that all kind of touch on different aspects of the sport globally. And the players are the ones, and the fans are the ones that have to float through all of that throughout the entire year to be able to either play the sport on behalf of the players or watch the sport on behalf of the fans. And none of that is working well for the players and the fans.
So is your aim to rip it up completely? Would you like to see a revolution, or is this to cause a stir that brings everybody back to the table? Because I don't think your aim ultimately is to see all these bodies in court, is it? That's going to be very, very expensive.
It's expensive, and that's not the fear so much as, we outlined all the issues in professional tennis, plaguing professional tennis. That and one of the things that we outlined is rankings points mandate, right? We're not trying to get rid of rankings points. We're not trying to get rid of tournaments. We're not trying to get rid of, certain players playing at certain events. What we're trying to do is have a system that is, we're not suing for anarchy, right? We're not suing
This
for...
is not your live moment then.
It is not our live moment. It is our NBA moment in the late 70s when their players sued them. It is our NFL moment when the NFL players sued in the 90s. In the US, college sports is going through a reformation right now as a result of a very similar set of antitrust cases brought on behalf of people who are not characterized or not deemed to be employees, just like the tennis players. We want broad reform. We want a reformation of the sport. Not a revolution per se, not a live moment, not Yeah, but we can't have incrementalism. And that's basically what we've seen
Mm.
for not only the last 3, 4, 5 years that the PTPA has existed, it's really what we've seen for the last 15, 20 years. And honestly, tennis has been left behind as compared to F1, the NBA, the NFL, the EPL. Tennis is still a global sport beloved by well over 1 billion fans, yet the business hasn't kept pace with that reality.
You mentioned some of the other sports. So in golf, in NBA and NFL, players get around 50% of the revenues. In Grand Slams, the tennis Grand Slams, the players get about 15. If those revenues went up to a comparable figure with golf, NBA, and NFL, would all the other issues disappear for you?
I think they wouldn't disappear.
If they said we'll go up to 50%, but we still want to be invasive on the phones and it will be different balls and you might be playing at 3 a.m., would you accept?
That's up to the players, not me. My sense would be that the players would be receptive to that. I think
So
you
is it
still
all about
have
the money?
no. I mean, I think any deal is about give and take. So yeah, the more you're willing to pay, probably the more anybody in our jobs are willing to put up with to certain limits. But I think this is about really, and if you look at these other sports, and part of the money ties into the fact that the schedule doesn't really make sense right now by everybody's admission. Having tennis tournaments that span 11 plus months annually doesn't really make sense. The NFL has the shortest professional season of any sport and is by far the highest value, right? For a game that isn't tremendously popular outside of the United States. And so that's a reflection of
Just
that.
let me put to you, Ahmed, some of the defences that have come from the governing bodies. The WTA said that filing is both regrettable and misguided. The ATP said that you had chosen division and distraction through misinformation over progress. The ITIA said it welcomes opportunity to engage on anti-corruption and anti-doping. So that they are not giving you any kind of hope from those comments there that that they're going to sit down right now and
I think
come to
if you
some
looked
kind of
at
middle
anybody's
ground.
Yeah, if you looked at any defendant's comments immediately after filing a lawsuit in business or politics or sport, they would, I mean, the same people who are hired to write those statements are hired across those organizations. We did not expect anything differently. What I've been pleasantly surprised by since we filed are the number of people from tournaments, from Grand Slams, from governing bodies, former employees, former leaders who have said, yes, you are on the right track, players. You need to push and force people to change because they're generally not going to change of their own volition unless and until they have to. And that's exactly what we saw with college sports in the US, with the NFL and the ML and the NBA as prior examples of this type of legal case. All of those started in exactly the same place. Of course, the leagues, of course, the governing bodies are going to say, we think this is without merit. We think this is, I do agree that it's regrettable. I would have loved that we were able to fix this ourselves without involving the courts. The reality is 3 years into my tenure, we haven't been able to do that.
So again, go back to some of the comparable sports that you've mentioned, and Gabby asked you whether this was tennis's live moment. Of course, golf dissatisfaction took several players onto a different tour with Saudi Arabian money. The other two that you've mentioned, NBA and NFL, have had strike action in the past and continue to carry strike action depending on what they are negotiating. Is that the weapon that you have in your back pocket then?
It is, but I would say that historically, legal action has been what's prompted the most change in all of those sports. They've all had those strike moments, those lockout moments, work stoppage moments, just like a lot of industries. But that is, 100 out of 100 on the scale, right? And I think maybe the legal action is a 90 or a 95, and we're not there all the way to 100. But that is the risk, right? The more people dig in and refuse to reform. And by the way, I say this against the backdrop of the last 12 months, the tours have tried to merge. So they're looking at reforming because they acknowledge the basic premise that we've all talked about, which is the sport needs to be modernized and made and optimized. The Grand Slams have tried to create a new tour called the Premium Tour that would revolutionize certain elements of the sport. None of these people have been able to get this done on their own. The players want that. They need to see that. And I think part of the approach here is let's burn the boats and say, look, the status quo is not acceptable. It's not tenable. We can't stay with that. We have to change. Let's figure out how to change.
But would they down tools? Would they not? Would they strike? Would they not play? Would they pull out of tournaments? And
The players?
Yeah. How serious are they about seeing this through?
I don't think we're there yet. They're serious about seeing this through, meaning the legal actions. That's for sure. And look, some of these things take years and they take tens of millions of dollars. And change is hard, especially when people are dug in politically and are more worried about their own jobs than what is best for their sport or their constituents or even their owners. Because if you look at the NBA and the NFL world, the players absolutely benefited and they make a lot of money, but nobody has benefited more than the owners of those franchises in those sports because that has grown, those values have grown at a far higher rate than the salaries of the players. And that's okay because to have a system that works, it needs to work for everybody.
Just one final thing from me on this, which is I think the majority of us can understand a lot of the issues that you are discussing, as in the background too, whether that be the universal ball, whether that be late finishes and scheduling, amount of tournaments and prize money. But unless we are an actual professional player or a member of their families, I don't think we have much idea of what a sort of the invasive search of personal devices means. What is the issue there? What are players having to put up with that they
why how
and why
Yeah.
and are no longer
Yeah.
happy to put up with?
It's all in service of a noble goal, which is keeping the sport clean, which is critical, right? You don't want cheaters, dopers participating in any sport. And that is a noble goal. Nobody cares more about that than the players themselves because they want to make sure that whoever's across the net from them is playing fair and square. So, against that backdrop, though, what has happened is this originally anti-doping was handled by the ITF. There was a scandal 5-6 years ago. They created the ITIA. They said that's a standalone entity. We're going to jointly fund it. We're going to all sit on the board of it. So put aside those governance issues for a moment. They have this new entity, relatively new entity, that handles doping under the WADA code, right? The World Anti-Doping Association. In tennis, many of those rules, just in terms of the practical application, because it's a global sport, in WADA oversees team sports, it oversees Olympic sports. When I'm training for the Olympics, if I were training for the Olympics, and I'm in my home city, it's a lot easier for me to say, oh yeah, the drug tester shows up once a week, but I'm at home or I'm at my gym or right? Here, you've got a global sport, tournaments every week, different city, different country, different continent. Depending on if I lost my first round match or if I went deep into a tournament, I have no idea where I'm going to be. Outside of maybe I know the start of Indian Wells, I'll be there. The start of Miami, I'll be there. The start of Roland Garros, I'll be there. I don't know how long I'll be there. I might have to scramble to find. And so the burden, because it's not a team sport, is entirely on the players. If this were soccer, if this were football, the teams are handling the logistics. Where are they going to be? What hotel? The whereabouts are much easier. It's a group. They're all together. Here, we've had instances of players checking into a hotel after midnight, being told, well, no, the hotel is sold out, but the tournament rebooked you at a hotel across the street. No big deal. You walk across the street, but you forgot to update your whereabouts. And your whereabouts says that you're at the other hotel. And then somebody shows up at 6 a.m., even though you checked in after midnight. And they say, oh, you're not here. Ding, missed test. It's your third missed test. You're out for 18 months. Not because you ever tested positive. By the way, in golf, in NFL, MLB, NBA, if you test positive, you're not suspended for 18 months. You don't miss a season and a half of your sport. So, and that's comparing to other sports is one example. Comparing to team sports is another example. And then comparing to your workplace. If in our workplace, somebody could show up and say, give me your phone, I'll bring it back to you in a couple days. No lawyer, no what's this about, no due process.
And what are they looking
right?
for on the phone?
Well, they're looking,
Evidence of buying banned
well,
substances, or
that's generally related to betting investigations. So,
right, okay.
ITIA covers both doping.
So do they have
and
to have
integrity.
do they have to have some proof or some clear line of investigation that's led them to that, or can they just turn up and take it?
They can just turn up. I mean, they will always say we have reason to believe, and they may or they may not. The problem right now is the rules are so opaque and the players are terrified. So what is, voluntary versus no, what are my actual rights? And this goes back to representation. Who represents the players in that context? Because the tours are funding the ITIA. The tours sit on the board of the ITIA. the tour's never set up a legal defense fund like we just did a couple of months ago so that players could tap into free legal resources if and when they, hopefully, God forbid, have any of these issues. And so it goes back to the fundamental, well, who represents any of these people? How can we, again, we want a clean sport. We want a sport that isn't infiltrated by betting and manipulating outcomes.
And,
No
and as
problem with
I
that.
mentioned before, the ITIA had said it welcomes opportunities to engage on anti-corruption and anti-doping. But all the things you point to there in terms of the disparity, if you're Novak Djokovic, you've got your team changing your whereabouts, haven't you? You've got all the kind of, as well as your masseuse and your dietitian and your trainer and your S&C, you've probably got a PA traveling with you as well. If you're 186 on the tour, it's you and your bag. So the onus is very much on you. And there are individual sports who also have to deal with this, cycling and athletics, but as you say, they don't generally get knocked out of somewhere on a Monday where they plan to be till Saturday and then find themselves in a different country on Wednesday. So that that is a positive, isn't it, that they want to engage on that. They want to sit down and find a way to make that work for players and make it fair across the board.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for today. Get in touch via email at thesportsagents@global.com or on our socials.
Catch up with all our episodes on Global Player or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember to hit subscribe or follow, and we'll be back on Thursday.
The Sports Agents
with Gabby Logan and Mark Chapman.